Frank Klose is on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Frank, did you play Red Ass?
No, and I don't think I'm interested in playing with you guys either.
All right, well, then you're not invited. How about that? All right, Frank, let's first start with Machado. Where do you stand? You wrote about 9 articles last night. It seemed like you were pounding out the keys last night. Where do you stand, and where are we now?
Well, it seems like there's some legs to what Bob Nightingale of USA Today Sports is saying, that the Dodgers really believe that they are close to a deal. There could be at the point where there are some medicals being exchanged. But I also tend to really like and trust Scott Lauber of the Philadelphia Inquirer, who says the Phillies still believe they're in it and are pushing still. So part of me sees both of them heavily involved. I really like what Craig Calcaterra of NBC Sports said earlier, that maybe the Orioles threw some stuff out to try to get the Phillies to increase their offer some. So it's really, really hard to say. The one thing I am noticing is often when stuff like this comes out, some of the big guys tend to either confirm or deny what some of these reports based on the people they're close to. And none of the big names are really, that usually are involved in these types of discussions, are really stepping in and saying, yes, I talked to somebody from the Dodgers and I can confirm that they feel they're close. So this one's really hard to say.
The Phillies, there was a report last night Adonis Medina would be involved. Would that surprise you, or are you surprised that they would be willing to give him up? And are you okay with that? You know the system pretty well, Frank.
I don't think that's a deal breaker to me. Even though Medina, he represented the Phillies in the Futures game after Aniel De Los Santos ended up pitching a game in the major leagues. Medina is a nice prospect, but sometimes when they're that low, you still don't know where they're going to go. Now, sometimes it ends up biting you in the behind later if you give up somebody that low and they end up really working out. But the Phillies on the other end of the stick, the last few years, some of the good trades that they made was taking chances on lower level pitching prospects and really developing them. Think of the Nick Pivetta who was in Class A when they grabbed him. Zach Eflin, who was in Class A, just off of Class A when they grabbed him, and they've ended up becoming major league starters. So, but there's still a certain level of uncertainty where these guys are going to go, and there's more development involved. Many times we've seen can't-miss pitching prospects just never work out, and even the Phillies, when they traded Kyle Drabek to the Toronto Blue Jays to help get Roy Halladay, he seemed like a can't-miss pitching prospect too. And we saw that Drabek never really got his feet under him as a major league pitcher. So I don't worry so much about trading people that far away, especially when you'll probably be able to replenish somebody at that level sooner than later.
So, Frank, is there a name for you that's untouchable? Is there a deal-breaking name for you?
I would try to avoid trading Sanchez unless you were getting a long-term piece. I would consider trading a Sanchez if you got somebody like Jacob deGrom, who may or may not be available depending who you ask. But I would not trade a Sanchez for a rental.
I might agree with that. If you mentioned deGrom's name, I might be willing to give up a heck of. Would you trade more to get deGrom or Machado?
Oh, deGrom all the way. Because deGrom still has 2 years of control after this. With Machado, you're kind of rolling the dice and hoping he sticks around after the season, and that's not necessarily a given.
Talk with Frank Klose. His Phillies mailbag is posted at 973ESPN.com. These are questions from the listeners, people on Twitter, at Frank Klose with a K. You can always send them your Phillies questions, and we'll answer those right here on the Sports Bash. And a lot of them centered around Manny Machado, Frank. So let's dive into your mailbag questions.
That's right, Frank. And Tom, of course, asking, because of the packages that are reported, why would the Phillies give up so much for a free agent to be?
Well, I think the thing to think about here is Aaron Nola is just having an outstanding season, which is really carrying this team. We don't know how Aaron Nola will do next year. We don't know how he'll do the year after. And a lot of it is about seizing the moment that you have in front of you. The Nationals aren't that great this year. In fact, I'm going to talk about Steven Strasburg in a second. The Atlanta Braves, they're kind of hanging in there still, but there's an opportunity here for the Phillies really to go for it, get into the playoffs, because tomorrow is never guaranteed. Now, the reason I mentioned the Nationals is that if you think back to 2012, they shut down Steven Strasburg thinking, oh, yeah, well, we'll shut him down now, and we'll have him for the playoffs every single year going forward. Well, guess what? They did make the playoffs in 2012, got eliminated right away. They don't make it back to the playoffs in 2013. Strasburg gets hurt. And ever since then, Strasburg's been in and out. And you can always look back at 2012 to the Nationals and say, why didn't they just go forward when they had the chance? I don't want to see the Phillies waste this opportunity. Now, it's almost morbid to think of the possibilities, but in Major League Baseball, starters get hurt, right? Almost every starter seems to have a Tommy John surgery at one point in their career. You hope Aaron Nola remains healthy, but you can't presume that Aaron Nola is going to remain healthy. And if you don't take advantage of this tremendous season that he's having right now and taking advantage of this momentum that you have, you may look back and regret that later. So I do trade some pieces to pick up pieces now, whether it's Machado or anybody else, to really get this Phillies a chance while they have it. But I would mention a moment ago somebody like a Sixto Sanchez for a rental, although I would consider that if you're getting back somebody who can be part of your long-term future as well.
Yeah, like DeGrom. So, of course, we keep hearing Machado. That's been the dominant name that we hear, Frank. But what else do the Phillies need right now? That's what Kevin wants to know.
Well, we saw recently that Zach Eflin had a little minor injury. It was just a blister. But it was really a reminder that you can never have enough starting pitching depth in the major leagues. Now, Enyel De Los Santos came up, and he's still a rookie. He kind of unraveled against the Marlins, and granted it was that one inning, and it was sort of aided by Carlos Santana forgetting how many outs there were. But you really don't necessarily want to throw rookies into that situation right now. Now, so in other words, I would look to see if they can find another starting pitcher. Now, actually, just yesterday, the Phillies were connected to Jay Happ once again. They've been connected to Cole Hamels in the past, and we frequently talked about how this Phillies team could use a left-handed starter to go along with their right-handed starters. You never can really overlook that when you go into a playoff series, you might face a lineup that's left-handed heavy, and somebody like Happ, somebody like Hamels might do a better job getting those lefties out than one of the right-handed members of the starting rotation would. So that seems to be something that they could use. And while we're talking about the left side, they could really use a left-handed reliever as well. They've been connected to Zach Britton, and in fact, I'm going to write something for 97.3ESPN.com, as if the 5 in the last 24 hours weren't enough, about how Zach Britton might be somebody that the Phillies do go after if the Machado thing doesn't work out. I don't think that the Phillies were going to get both Machado and Britton from the Orioles because the Orioles, while they like the Phillies system, they probably have their eyes on some key pieces in the Phillies system that they would like. And if let's say they don't get Manny Machado, the Orioles are still going to like those guys. And in Zach Britton is somebody who, granted, he kind of had a rough start getting off the ground after he came back from his injury, but he's looking like the old Zach Britton the last several outings he has, and he's left-handed. So imagine going down the stretch with Sir Anthony Dominguez and Zach Britton as kind of your 1-2 lefty-righty punch that you can mix and match. And let's not forget, we've talked about Brad Hand before, who is with the San Diego Padres and working as their closer and doing a great job. He's somebody who can help you not just this year, but next year. And I know Pete mentioned Vasquez of the Pirates before. He's a lefty that could be available, and I don't believe he's a free agent yet either. So if you can get a left-handed starter, if you can get a left-handed reliever, I think that left-handed help, whether it's on either side or maybe both sides, would be a great asset for the Phillies as they go down the stretch here.
A couple other quick names that we're reading. Jay Happ and then the duo of Cole Hamels and Adrian Beltre. Any interest there?
Well, the Phillies were said to be interested, and Cole Hamels, he was pretty blunt about it. He said, well, if I'm going to be traded, that would be an ideal situation to go back to the Phillies. But I think the Phillies are going to still try to make the best baseball trade that they can make, regardless of their the history they have with Hamels and the history they have with even somebody like Happ. I think that a lot would depend on what they want in return. The Rangers clearly need some young assets. There hasn't been much smoke around such a trade lately. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing, Nicole Hamels is actually vacationing up the road at Ocean City right now during this All-Star break. I think he'd love to be a Philly. I think there's a lot about the Phillies that would love to have him back, but at least in terms of any type of movement, we're not seeing that right now. Hamels, his last two starts have been kind of rough. I watched his last start. He seemed to pitch okay for 6 innings, and then in the 7th inning, he got roughed up a little bit against the Orioles. So who knows? Yeah, I think at the end of the day, they're gonna really. The scouts are watching him. I will say that's something that's very clear. The scouts are going to watch Hamels. They're going to watch Happ. They're going to watch what other left-handed options are out there. But those two seem to be the left-handed options available. They're not just looking for ex-Phillies. So if the deal is right, I think they would be amenable to making a deal for either. But again, only if the deal is right.
And Frank Klose is with us. Frank, speaking of former Phillies and guys coming back, this guy's not coming back in a trade, but he's going to come back for his adulation and accolades. Chase Utley coming back with the Dodgers Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. So Christian wants to know, and it's a timely question, will Chase's number 26 jersey be retired in Philadelphia?
Yeah, this is a really, really good question. And when we look at this question, there's a number of factors here. One of them is that the Phillies actually have a policy that they don't retire a number unless the player is in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, I think we're going to talk about this at length over the next few years, and then again in 5 years after the season when Utley is up for a possible vote. But a lot could depend on whether or not Chase Utley is a Hall of Famer. Now, if you look at some of the top second basemen that we can think of in the last 25 years, we think of the likes of Brian Steinberg and Roberto Alomar and Craig Biggio, and they've all made it to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. But when you compare Utley to those guys, the things that he doesn't have is he doesn't hit a 3,000 hit plateau. He doesn't have an MVP title. He doesn't own a single Gold Glove award. Now, a lot of the people that are more into the advanced stats seem to like Utley a lot more. But the fact remains, the same people that voted for those players I just mentioned are going to be voting for Chase Utley. So there's a lot to talk about there in terms of whether or not he would qualify for the Hall of Fame, and I think that's a really extended discussion we can have later on. But what they do with his jersey, I think they're going to perhaps find a way to be a little creative here. Now, the Wall of Fame, the Phillies recently changed the rules for that so that Jim Thome could get on in terms of the number of years as a Philly. Thome spent parts of 4 seasons with the Phillies, and when it came time when it comes time for these gigs, the likes of Chase Utley and Ryan Howard and Jimmy Rollins, they might find a way to get them into the discussion too. Now, one thing that we do know is that they are purposely holding those 3 jersey numbers out of circulation. John Maley, I know, asked if he could have number 11, which was Jimmy Rollins' number. And, John Maley wasn't trying to take over Jimmy Rollins' legacy by any means, but, he has a special connection with his father in the armed forces, and number 11. They said they'd prefer not to give him number 11 because they were holding that off. So they may make a change that would allow for such an honor like that. But I think they're going to have to come down from their Hall of Fame requirement for that to happen.
Frank Klose is with us here at Frank Klose on Twitter. Keep an eye on that and 97.3 ESPN.com for the latest on Manny Machado. And that probably will not happen till tomorrow, although there is a tweet from Bob Nightingale who says that the commissioner said there is no mandate by his office for the Orioles to hold off a pending announcement before tonight's All-Star game, but he would prefer that they wait until tomorrow, which means you're not hearing anything tonight. Frank, enjoy the Midsummer Classic.
Thank you. You guys do the same.